Hello and welcome to the Data Delicacies show, where we're going to explore the intersection of data and hospitality and discuss the varying impacts it has on both operators and consumers alike. Every bite we take tells a story, and we're going to dive deep to see where technology meets gastronomy and how data can be the secret ingredient to success to enrich the culinary experience for both operators and consumers alike. That's what we aim to find out on this show by talking to the best and brightest in the industry. I'm your host, Arun Kumar, and this show is presented by Incentivio. We're the ultimate guest engagement platform for restaurants. We are in a world where every customer's experience is a story waiting to be written, and we aim to be that digital pen that curates these narratives. Incentivio is just not another SaaS platform, but a culinary companion and a strategic partner with the mission to enhance the guest experience and help operators supercharge their efficiency. Today, we have an amazing guest, someone I'm very, very proud to call a friend of mine and someone that I go to for a lot of advice in this industry. We have the one and only Branden McRill. Branden, thank you for joining.
Hello, good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Branden, we worked together for many years, and I know a lot of your story, but I would love for you to share, because you have an awesome background. Love for you to just share, your background in hospitality and now becoming, co-founder, CEO of 5 Out. I'd love to hear that journey and what got you to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a 26 going on 27-year restaurateur. I still own and operate 3 restaurants in Philadelphia today. I got started in the business when I was 15. Serendipitously, I was a soccer player. I got injured to the point where I couldn't play. But I could still walk and do other things. So I had a lot of pent up energy at that time in my life. So I went and got a job. And the first job I could get was that of a car park and a dishwasher. So when I was 15, I was working at a private club, parking cars and washing dishes. And so what I would do is I would put on a little $2.25 white tuxedo shirt and a clip-on tie and these little black tuxedo pants with the line down the sides. And I would park people's cars for a restaurant sit-down dinner. And then I would run inside, take the tie off and the shirt off and put on a busser's apron. And then I would wash dishes while they would eat in different courses would go by. And then I would go back outside at the end, put the shirt and the tie back on, and I would unpark their cars. And this is actually, funnily, before I even had a driver's license. So that was my first job in the restaurant industry. And then I stayed in it through high school and college. I was working in downtown Detroit. And then I transferred schools from downtown Detroit to Columbia, Chicago. And I was working at this pizza place. And all of a sudden, I kind of accidentally fell into working in this very high-end restaurant. I was 22 at the time. And I went from wearing cargo shorts and a t-shirt and tennis shoes and hustling pizzas and buckets of beer to I got hired at a restaurant where they sent me to downtown Chicago, Michigan Avenue to the Ermenegilde Lasagna store, which if you're not familiar is a wonderful store that I had no business being in. Fit for a custom $2,000 suit, $1,000 pair of tennis shoes. And I got hired to work in this restaurant, Alinea, which ended up being a 3 Michelin star, 4-star restaurant, one of the top restaurants in the world, and totally reshifted my entire focus on life. I lost 80 pounds within the first 6 months of working there, running up and down the stairs, running food all night long. I dropped out of school, much to my parents' chagrin, and I really just dedicated the rest of my life to hospitality, restaurants, food, wine, beverage, and service. And so from there, I went to work for Paul Kahn and Donnie Medeo at Blackbird and Avec. Paul and Don is from The Bear, if you all watch The Bear. And then from there, I went and worked for Let Us Entertain You at their 2 Michelin star restaurant, True. I then got recruited by Danny Meyer to move to New York City to work at the Modern Museum of Art. I then went on to work for John George, Alain Ducasse, David Burke, back to John George. I opened up the first full-service hotel in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. I opened 5 restaurants for Marcus Samuelsson. I was 29, and then I said, I want to start doing my own thing. So I opened my own first restaurant on the Lower East Side of Manhattan called Pearl and Ash. 2 years later, we opened up another restaurant, myself and my partner, Patrick. We opened up another restaurant next door called Rebel, which we got a Michelin star with them being open for like 3.5 months, which was a record and unheralded, basically. That put us on a national radar, and we got recruited by a publicly traded REIT to move to Philadelphia to open up 3 restaurants that I still own and operate today. And that's nearly 27 years of my life in the hospitality industry on the restaurant side. I'll pause there. Any questions?
Yeah, I know we've chatted a lot. That is a mind-blowing story. So there is one question I have for you. So you mentioned that first gig you had where you dropped out of school, busing, and you had the suit, everything. They do nice suits there, by the way. What was it? What was the epiphany you had, or what was that, moment you had where you're like, this is the life I want to choose?
It's a great question. It happened very, very fast and very early. during the process of getting that restaurant open, which I joined pre-opening, there was a day where, 2 days actually of training, where one half of the staff was responsible for going in and sitting down and being served by the other half of the staff the entirety of this 28-course tasting menu. We started in the morning and didn't finish until very late in the evening because we were spending between 30 and 45 minutes going over each and every one of these dishes. So I was part of the team that sat first. And so I was in this dining room with half the team being served by the other half of the team. And in going through all of these dishes, I was just blown away with this restaurant, this service, but most specifically this food. In my household growing up, everybody worked all the time, and putting together elaborate meals was just not in the cards. And also, we grew up in a situation where going out to dinner often or to fine dining restaurants or often at all was also not in the cards. Just financially, it just wasn't there. So I never had been to a fine dining restaurant in my life. And now, like when we would go out to eat, truck stop, diner, those types of restaurants. Now I'm in top restaurants in the world now today. And I was eating at it preemptive of it opening, going through all of this food in this beautiful restaurant with these beautiful service pieces and these ornate presentations. 22 years, never seen anything like this, didn't even know it existed. Just floored, taken aback, breath away. I'm like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Now, mind you, I was already in the industry for 7 years for money. Now I'm like, this is it. This is it for me. This is my passion. And I was also in art school at the time. So this was a correlative, easy correlative to see this as beautiful artistic art, whether it's from a food presentation or from an experiential presentation. Like that's really what it did for me. It was that tasting that we did, just knocked me out, and I was sold and sunk for forever.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like that's something you remember like it happened yesterday. The way you're describing it, it's like you'll probably something you'll never forget.
I could walk around that restaurant with a blindfold on today and put food and plates down at any seat in the restaurant without any guide or direction and explain any dish that was on that menu today, 20 years later. That's
unbelievable. And you know what? It's funny. You referenced the bear. I'm going to reference an episode from the nearest season where Cousin had to go and work at that Michelin star, and that's where he got his training, right? To go like scrub the forks and had to do the plating. And I guess, my question to you is, you had experience on both sides. You said, as a consumer going to like a truck stop, diner, that kind of stuff, and then working at a Michelin star run. And then now you have multiple restaurants you run on your own. How much of both of those different experiences did you incorporate into those restaurants? Like, what's the vibe when you walk into one of your restaurants, and how much did you take from those experiences and put in there?
So that's a really good question, a very good question. And that's been an evolution over the years. So I opened my first restaurant 13, 14 years ago. And so interestingly, when I opened it in the Lower East Side of Manhattan on the Bowery, which if you're not familiar with the Bowery, it's not one of the like places where people necessarily go to if they're visiting New York City. It's not somewhere that people recommend that tourists go to. It's a troubled area. It's been a troubled area since World War II, when a lot of soldiers returned home from the war. They kind of took up housing there because they got dropped off by the boats there. They kind of hung out there, and it became a little bit of a troubled alley. There was some things going on at night that just kind of were a little bit difficult, and they stayed that way until today. It's still a little bit of a troubled area. Not anywhere that you really want to hang out, like in the middle of the dark of the night, but during the day, a vibrant part of town. So we opened up this restaurant on the Bowery, and it needed to kind of coalesce with the neighborhood. I had exclusively nearly worked at 3 Michelin star, 2 Michelin star fine dining restaurants for the trailing 10-ish, 15 years of my life. And so we wanted to figure out how we could, to your point of your question, how can we take the best of all that, strip it down to its core competency, and bring only the things that are critical to a dining experience and not the nice to haves, but the absolute must haves. So that's hospitality. It's friendliness. It is being quick. It is being focused. It is being having a high sense of urgency and attention to detail, paying attention to not only what it is you're doing, but paying attention to guests, and building and curating an experience. We had very little money to open up that restaurant. It was previously a store that sold kitchen equipment. We had wood tables that we built and sanded and stained ourselves. We had paper napkins. We bought all of our lighting fixtures from like used lighting stores. We had no heat. We had no not heat for the room. We had heat for the room. We actually had those like split units on the wall because we didn't have fully serviced HVAC, but so we had split units for that. But even in the kitchen, we didn't have burners. We had just induction cooktops. We had 2 induction cooktops, a combi oven, this was just steam oven, and a salamander. And it was only wide enough of a kitchen for 3 people to stand in, and not one more person could fit in it. And you couldn't go like that and not bump into somebody. So it was about the most efficient restaurant we'd ever built. But we brought all of those other things that we talked about. We brought the hospitality. We brought, the guest experience. We brought the attention to detail. We brought all of those things that are born and bred in all of these 3 Michelin star, 4-star restaurants, or 2 Michelin star, whatever you want to call it, great restaurants, stars aside, just great restaurants. We brought all of that into that environment. And even though people were sitting on a bench that was backless with a paper napkin, with a $2 plate and a $2 wine glass and a split unit HVAC on the Bowery where people are across the street doing things that cannot be mentioned, they loved it. They had a great time and the restaurant was packed and it was phenomenal. And so those are the things that we brought into the restaurants. And when we opened the French restaurant next door, which was called Rebelle, the same thing. It was a 1 Michelin starred French restaurant, but we still didn't have much money. So we took it was basically a loungy nightclub and we converted it into a French restaurant. It was like all dark and black. So we maintained all those colors. We brought in some furniture, some new lighting fixtures. We built a bar. We built out a kitchen with what little resources we had. And we were off to the races. And it was something, again, where we brought all of those core competencies that we had, myself and all the team members and all the people that we brought into the project, who all came from great restaurants, a great experience and great background, to come and bring that to that. And that's also, I feel like, what we have done a lot today in my restaurants in Philadelphia. So I have 3 restaurants in Philadelphia today. Walnut Street Cafe, Sunset Social, and The Post. Walnut Street Cafe is a full-service restaurant. The Post is a 7,000 square foot American beer hall. And then I have a QSR burger restaurant that is sitting on the top of a 12-story parking garage overlooking downtown Philadelphia that's 6 months and seasonal. And even though we have all of these different casual restaurants, all the way up to full-service fine dining, we still look to bring all of those competencies. Yeah. It's really all about, at the end of the day, distilled to guest interaction, hospitality, making sure people feel welcome and comfortable, that you're giving them a high quality product, that there's an obsessive attention to detail and a sense of urgency. You can't make a bad restaurant if you have those things as the foundation and the pillars. You couldn't do it.
Yeah. And you know what, I just want to, you mentioned some really cool things there. And what I'm taking away is that you can have all the coolest physical items or not, right? Tables and what you've been able to instill, over and over again is that human concept, right? Of hospitality and making the guest experience. So it's like, regardless if you have the nicest decor and the nicest paint and all this different stuff, what it sounds to me like is the human component is really what can make or break that experience for a guest.
Without question, with very few exceptions. I've traveled the world and I've eaten at some of the best rated restaurants in the world, and some of them are phenomenal and not fun, and some of them are phenomenal and really fun. And where do you think you want to go back to? You want to go back to the place that's phenomenal and really fun. Yeah. Really fun is emotion. If you are talking about art or music or anything in that creative space, you may love it and it might not be fine, but it might be fine and you might love it. And where the cross section happens, when it's fine and you love it, is when things truly resonate with you and make, I think, very meaningful, lasting experiences. Also, things that are not fine that you love, you can also still have very lasting, meaningful relationships with. But that's really, I think, the crux of it is that crossover of fine and you love it, which means it's fun because that pulls at your emotions. Yes. Everything that people respond to, for the most part, I don't like to use those swap statements about everything and everybody, but for the most part, people react to things emotionally first.
Yes.
You see something with your eyes and it makes you feel something good about how it's going to taste. That's an emotion. You interact with a person inside of a restaurant and how they talk to you and the way that they use their voice cadence and their facial features and how they stand and their body language all plays out to how they feel about the experience. And everything that again, SWOT statement, everything that people talk about when they talk about a restaurant or a movie or a piece of art or a piece of music is,
Right.
do I like it? And what do I like it is really, does it make me feel good? That's really what it's about. And it's all about
Yeah.
making me feel good.
Yeah, you know what? I'm just thinking about some of the best experience that I've had just in this industry alone, and some of the dinners I've been to. I mean, there's a ton of dinners you go to at these shows, and was that I think the first RFDC I went to maybe 3-4 years ago, and a few of us went to Carbone, and honestly, the meal was great. Like, it was a good meal, but it was more. We had an unbelievable waiter that walked us through the whole menu and just kind of had a tasting thing, but just us. I remember they were playing old school hip hop, and we just sat there, just drinking wine for like 3 to 4 hours. And it was my good friend Sean Braden over at QPOS. It was Brad Bertrand from Razzie, a few of the folks at Sanchez where I was at the time, and I'll never forget. That was the most unforgettable experience I had just in this industry, just sitting there and just chatting. And to your point, it was an emotional thing, right? Like, we just a good time, and I always go back on that because food all that stuff was great. Don't get me wrong, but that piece of it is what I'll never forget. Like, I can always remember back to that dinner like it happened yesterday, and we always talk about it. So all the stuff you do resonate. So it sounds like you could even take like a picnic bench with paper plates and red cups and make that an unbelievable experience with the experience that you had in terms of curating that. So that sounds, that's very interesting because I mean, always like to get the perspective of folks from the industry that have run restaurants to see like what their mindset is going into it. So that's really cool that that's the way you approach it. So want to switch over to, okay, your hospitality experience, unbelievable. Now let's talk about that flip over now. I know you're still living in both worlds, but 5 Out, talk about 5 Out. How did that start? And tell the folks a little bit what 5 Out does and what you're trying to solve in this industry.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back a few years. When I was 26, 27, I got hired into a restaurant where at first I was a sommelier. So somebody who makes recommendations on wine, buys wine, stocks wine, and beverage and things like that. And that was my job. And being there for a few weeks, my direct report got shifted over from my restaurant to another restaurant within the group. And they're like, you're that person now. And that person was the beverage director of the entire restaurant and a manager. And so they said, you have all that responsibility. And I'm not throwing shade, but they didn't give me any training for that. They just said, this is it now. And they walked out of the room, figuratively speaking. And so I'm like, okay, what does this job do to an empty room? And I just kind of had to figure it out. And one of the most important things in business, of course, because obviously the business side of restaurants is critically important as well, is understanding how to make your department profitable. And so what I did was I would anticipate what we were going to sell in advance, both from a revenue perspective as well as from a line item perspective. So like what bottles of wine, what cocktails, how much liquor. And I would try to guess at how much we were going to sell based on what had happened previously, and then use that, create a forward-looking forecast. And then I would make my purchases against what I thought we were going to sell in terms of quantity, as well as a percentage of total revenue, right? Because I want to buy the right product and also spend the right amount of money relative to the total sales. And in doing so, it made my job very easy because I didn't have to think about what was going to happen at the end of the month when it was time for the P&L meeting to determine whether or not I had done my job appropriately, because you're measured well in how you treat people and what you can recommend, but you're also measured in how you manage your end of the business. And when I was in that position, I had that end of the business. 45, 50% of the sales. So it's a big deal. So in doing that little exercise, I was able to maintain my controls or my cost controls, beat my numbers. And in those meetings, I never really had to get told anything negative, which sometimes P&L meetings are not always the best if things aren't going well. And I never had to hear anything negative. And that was great for me because I'm a type of person who I don't necessarily feel like I need commendation, but I also like to be left alone into my own devices. So I don't need to be patted on the back, but if you don't tell me anything's going wrong, that's all I need. Let me just keep doing my thing and run my race. So that really stuck with me. So every restaurant thereafter, I kept repeating that system. Well, now fast forward to a point where I own restaurants. Not everybody in the restaurant industry is as analytical. There are a lot of creative people in the restaurant industry who love human interaction, who love the creativity and the art side of things, who love, creating new drinks and new dishes, serving guests, etc. Not always are they also analytical. Not also do they always love the math side of things. Not always do they always love this business side of things. And I'll also say, even if they are that type of minded individual, there's not always the right training and the right type of education. It doesn't just exist necessarily in all the restaurants in the United States. If it did, there would be a lot more restaurants in the United States doing better than me, right? This is obvious. So I wanted to create education for the finance of restaurants, similarly as there is education for food and beverage and service and hospitality, all of which you see on the Bear. But even on the Bear, they don't really delve into people getting trained on the back end financials. It's not sexy, right? It's just not the fun part of the hospitality industry, but it's critical. It's important. So I wanted to teach it. So I started to try to teach it, and I wasn't great at it. So because I wasn't great at it, I'm like, I got to do something. I got to do something else. I need to figure out a way to be able to get this information into my team's hands so as to allow them to make smarter, better decisions more quickly so that they can be successful on the culinary and beverage side of things and service side of things, and also on the financial side of things. Now, in comes Mike Marion, who is currently my co-founder in 5out. He was at the time my CFO. He is now my chief technology officer. He's been coding since he was 12. He went to BU and got a degree in finance, but he got his first job in Citibank over in Long Island City. He led a team of 250 on and offshore developers the entire 10 years he was there. Left on his 10-year anniversary, not wanting to work for a big bank anymore. No offense against Citibank, but he just didn't want to work for a bank anymore. Started a consultancy for hospitality, specifically focused on hotels and restaurants. I was his third client. He walked in the door and was like, tell me everything that's going on with tech and finance. And I said, tech space is disparate. Things don't talk to each other. It would be better if they did. I said, however, even if they did, if you connected all this data, it's just a bigger stack of data, which is not what is needed. That's not what people in the hospitality business need. They need the answers taken from the information. So he said, okay, I got the idea. Let me pull all the raw data from all the systems. I'm going to drop it into an Excel spreadsheet. We're also going to pull some outside data sources. We're going to drop that into an Excel spreadsheet. We're going to create a forecast. We're going to forecast what we're going to sell weekly, daily, hourly at a revenue level. Then we're going to look at reservations, and we're going to forecast what we're going to have people coming in the door at a weekly, daily, hourly level. Now we're going to look at our PMix. What are we going to sell? What do we think we're going to sell for every person that walks in the door? What's the likelihood that they're going to order X, Y, or Z? Now we have an understanding of what a PMix looks like. So now we know how much money, what time, who's coming, what time, how many, and the things they're going to buy. Now it's just simple mind it or open up the accordion, and you can get to a labor schedule, and you can get to a COGS budget, and we can take these numbers that are now prescriptive and action-based and hand them to department heads and say, this is what you need to buy, and when, and how many, and how much money to spend on it. And here's how many people you need to schedule in which area, at which time, to be able to service all of these things that are interested and produce those things. And in doing so, we were able to right-size our business, which at the time was doing $2.9 million in gross annual sales, by $340,000 over a 12-month calendar year. So a massive improvement. This was in my own restaurant. I will also say a similar opportunity exists in all of the restaurants I've ever worked at, including the ones I own and operate today, and most restaurateurs that we talk to in our day-to-day business in 5out. So if everybody knew exactly what they were going to sell tomorrow, and they knew who was coming, and they knew what time, and they knew what they were going to buy, you would run your business perfectly. But people don't have that visibility. That's why we created 5out. So we did one restaurant, and then my second restaurant, and then I did 3 more restaurants. And so Mike did the 3 other restaurants, and he was doing all this manually, creating these sheets manually, doing this entry manually, sitting with the teams manually, training them manually, updating them manually as things change, like weather and events. And he became in Capital Wall. 2017, he ran out of time. He's like, I can't do any more restaurants. And I was like, okay, we're going to turn this into software. And he said, great, let's do it. He was that's what he did for his entire life. He loved the idea. So that's what we did. Fast forward to today, 5out is exactly that, except at a much bigger scale. It's a much bigger animal. And it's a machine learning based forecasting solution for restaurants that forecasts revenue, covers, check average, per person average, item-wise sales forward up to 35 days in advance. With that information, we automate labor budgets by weekly, weekday and hour in department, and COGS budgets by major category. We tell you exactly how many items you're going to sell down to the individual item on an individualized day, and tell you how much money to spend on it and how many pieces to buy. And that's what people are utilizing it for to this day.
That's unbelievable. So, you started your time as a sommelier with this kind of idea originated. Did you ever imagine it getting to where it is now?
So when I was 22, I shouldn't tell this story, but I'm gonna anyway. I think within 3 months or so of working with working at Alinea, I had a meeting with Grant Atkins where he was the chef owner of the restaurant, still is, and I sat down with him, and it was just a general check-in. And I said to him somewhere in that meeting, I'm going to open a competing restaurant across the street within 2 or 3 years, which was just unworldly thing to say. Not in a competitive way, but just he was asking me, what do you want to do? How do you want to grow?
Right.
I said, I want to do what you're doing. I want to do this. I want to do it right across the street. Not because I want to, steal your business, but because I think what you're doing is awesome. I would love to be close to it, and I would love to be doing something similar. And that's what I'm going to do. So that was my vision. It wasn't until I got to working with Marcus Samuelson and I was 28, and Marcus said to me, and I didn't open a restaurant across the street from Alinea when I was 22 within 2 or 3 years competitively, just to point on that fact. Fast forward 6 years later, I'm working for Marcus Samuelson in New York City, and I was sitting and having a meeting with him, and he said, we were talking about this and that, and was actually coaching me and counseling me on some things that I could do better. And he said, I know, and we all know, all the senior leader teams, you're going to open a restaurant someday, and you're going to do things on your own, and you're going to do them your own way. And we love that. We support it, and we want you to do that. But today, I need you to do things the way that we do them here. He was helping me be the brand. And that was a luminary moment, because I hadn't much thought about that since that time when I was 22. And when Marcus said that to me, it really put a spark in. And I said, you know what? I do need to open my own thing as my next thing. And that's exactly why I did that. So my very next job was opening up my own restaurant.
Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable just hearing kind of like the different phases you went through, and now seeing where 5 Out is today, and obviously an incredible amount of success. I've been fortunate enough to partner with you guys, on the 7 Shift side. And big shout out to Mike. Mike is awesome. So please tell him I say hi. I actually
want to say one more thing though, if I can.
Yeah, please. No, we're not done. Yeah.
To get to I just didn't answer the question fully. To get from there to opening an own restaurant to starting a software company, it was never about starting a software company. It was never what it was about. We built a solution internal of my restaurants for my own team's benefit. And then we scaled that to other restaurants that were all mine. And then as soon as we did that, we realized that this was going to be helpful to other people. And we first ourselves, because remember, Mike ran out of the amount of hours in a day to be able to spend more time on this. And he was just like, I'm burnt. I can't do more.
Right.
So that's why we created software. It wasn't until after we created the software that we actually thought to turn it around to other people to go and help the rest of the industry. And that was the segue that I think was probably the most pivotal moment that put me in the position where I'm in today. It had gotten to a point where we knew we could create the software. We knew we could help other people. And we knew that we could bring this to other folks. And that is probably the most important pivotal moment in reference to, the evolution of 5 Out.
Yeah. And so let me ask you this. So as you start having these conversations with, I'm sure you're very connected in the industry, right? You're having maybe conversations with friends that own restaurants, and then starting to get maybe some organic folks that were coming through. What was the world that they were living in? Was it a lot of just, assuming a lot of it is a guessing game, right? When it comes to like very advanced forecasting, what you do, some would maybe have like multiple different systems. Would love to hear, like, what were you hearing that they were doing, and what was the vision you were paying for them?
So I think a big untalked about issue in the restaurant industry that should be talked about more is that there is not a lot of forecasting that happens at scale. There's some groups out there that have sophisticated financial service teams that do forecasting, but they're not as many as would benefit the restaurant industry as a whole. Like, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000. I don't know what the data is, but we don't come across them often. I can tell you that. So what you do have is budgets, and budgets are aspirational. They are what you sit down with your team at the end of the calendar year and determine that you would like to happen in the following year. It's more often a wish list and a hope than it is practical, pragmatic. And that's dangerous, because if you write that, well, guess what happens when you take that yearly budget, you break it into a month, and you turn it over to an operations team and say, march to the beat of this. Well, guess what? If you don't hit the revenue number, but you're spending that money on COGS, and you're spending that money on labor, you know what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Bleeding. And that's not good. So where is the where is the right size of here's what's actually happening in the restaurant right now from a revenue perspective. Could be more, could be same, but it's often less. And what is the actual budget I'm supposed to spend for COGS and labor against that? And that just doesn't happen as much as it needs to. So restaurants need to budget. They need to be accountable to themselves, accountable to shareholders, accountable to investors. But the operators who work within the four walls of the restaurant, they got to deal with what's going on in the restaurant, in real life, in real time, not what's on the budget. Especially if you can't effectuate change of what's happening with revenue. If you work in the restaurant, you're probably not the chief marketing officer. You're probably not the PR team. So you're not driving that new business. You're really just dealing with the inbound revenue, right? And so you need to schedule to that. So I think that's the biggest thing that happens in restaurants currently, where forecasting is needed because it just doesn't exist. They're just 9 out of the 10 people we talk to don't have any forecasting whatsoever. 30 to 50% of them, and that's probably cutting it short, don't have a true budget that was truly informed or educated by any sort of mathematical situation. It's typically last year plus a couple points, 2 points, 5 points, 7 points, sometimes more. And that's how people are running their business. And it doesn't work. It absolutely just doesn't work.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. And I guess you talked a bit about the gap in education in the industry, right? So it sounds like part of what you're doing is one, helping restaurants through tech, but also a big part of it is education on, I'm sure a lot of restaurateurs aren't aware of this level of detail they can go into.
I call it a change in trains of thought first, to see that if they knew what was going to happen in advance, because people don't know that when we come and knock on their door. Just because Netflix is out there recommending your next show to you, and Waze is telling you which direction to turn on the map, and Amazon is saying that you would probably like this item, and people know that, and they know that it's out there, and they know that it exists. They don't know that there's often a restaurant solution that can tell them what's going to happen in advance. And we're knocking on the door, times they're learning about it for the first time. So first, discovery. Did you know that there's an AI/ML solution out there that can tell you what you're going to sell before it happens? No, I didn't. So, okay, let me tell you about that. All right, that's interesting. Skepticism. Interest, skepticism, but still, okay, let's keep talking. Yeah, it does. It tells you what you're going to sell and when, so that you can actually schedule and purchase against it. That's really interesting. So in theory, it could replace your manual forecasting that you're currently doing. Well, I'm not doing forecasting. Oh, well, it could replace or work alongside your budget. Yeah, I kind of have a budget. I was kind of going off of last year, or I don't have a budget, or we need to get around to doing that. And now all of a sudden, there's something that's coming in that never existed previously. Not even the train of thought. And now, where there was no forecast, there's a forecast. And ostensibly, it's often replacing the operational budget, because the budget, it may not be operational. It just might be aspirational. You can't work off of an aspirational budget. So now we're getting people to think in a new way. Most importantly, we have to get them to adopt, to utilize this data, adopt it into their restaurant, change the way that they currently do things. Because I was scheduling this way and purchasing this way, whether it was copy pasting last week, copy pasting from the previous year, writing down whatever was on my budget and just utilizing that. And now we got to change basically how we're doing the two most important things that we do inside of our restaurant and modify to this process. That is by far and away, you didn't ask, that by far and away is our biggest challenge, is getting people to adopt the train of thought and then shift the processes inside their restaurant. Yeah,
because I'm sure that there's probably a lot of new stuff coming to them at the same time, and they're okay, well, I don't even do this, and I don't even do this. So it's almost like starting. Some folks are probably further on, and some folks are maybe just they're like, I didn't know any of this stuff existed. So you're probably having the full spectrum of conversations.
I mean, I would say 1 in 10 people say to us, not only did I know that it exists, but I'm just not ready for this. This is too much. I can't handle that. And then you got the next group who's like, this is exciting. This is interesting. I think I want to try this. And then you get the next group who's like, I got a budget, and I'm kind of thinking about it on a weekly basis, how things change. And they're like, let me jump in here. And then the next group is like, we've got a budget, we've got a forecast, but this is automated and likely more accurate than what we're currently doing. Let's go. And it's that very stage that we see throughout the arc of all the people that we talk to.
Yeah. So you brought up AI and ML, which I'd love to dive into, because I know I've come to you for a lot of this stuff. I look at you very much as one of the industry experts on this. So, and I'd love for you to share what you shared me before we got onto the show. You talked about ChatGPT and the ripple effects, right? Yeah. So that piece of it, And just even is, what do you perceive as the general skepticism around AI and ML in the industry, right? And is a lot of it timing? I mean, to your point, we see Netflix and Amazon, all these different places that do suggestions using some of those models. And even I use ChatGPT all the time for personal use, but how much of that do you see starting to really take effect into the industry?
Yep. So my personal experience, since we started building out the requirements for 5-out on paper, whiteboard, 2019, started materially working on it in 2020, put an MVP out in 21, didn't come to market until 2022. So we're knocking on people's doors in 22, being like, hello, it's your AI ML salesperson here. And people were like, mostly, I don't know what that is. I'm not sure how to use that. I've never heard of that. I didn't know that's available for the industry. I'm not sure I want that. And all sorts of various levels of skepticism, or even if they were, okay, tell me, but I'm still skeptical. Like that's kind of what 22 was like. Right. 23, ChatGPT, and ChatGPT kind of hit market a little bit in like late 22, but in like February, March, it was kind of like boom. And it was just a talking point for everybody across the United States. Again, swath statement, but a lot of people, and it was in a lot of press and media, just general press and media. Yeah. And what I saw immediately, and this was serendipitous and fantastic and great for us, was a lot of people in the restaurant space who are working in restaurants and a lot of people who are on the tech side of things started proliferating about artificial intelligence and they started saying that this is important. It's the future. Everybody needs to get on board. If you don't, in 2 or 3 years, you're going to be too far behind to be able to stay relevant, to be able to stay competitive. You got to do this. What I knew at that time, and I still know today, is that most of those folks weren't much further along than they are today in their AI ML journey. I.e., there just wasn't a bunch of AI ML solutions in the hospitality space at that time that people had adopted and been utilizing for a long time successfully. So a lot of that was like, prognosticating, this is what you should do, but I should also be doing it too, because I'm not doing it either. Like full transparency. And again, just one person's opinion, but I think people weren't as far along as they may have been kind of edging that they were. Right. So, but what that did for us was now all of a sudden, an entire group of people in 2022 were not interested to skeptical. We're now starting at a point of interested into very interested. So now all of a sudden, more people started knocking on our doors than we were knocking on doors. And that led us to some growth over the period of 2023. And then here's the ripple effect. The ripple effect is when the talking heads who were talked in 23 early, it took a while for them to talk internally, because these, in certain circumstances, are very large groups, to figure out what they wanted to do next and to research what they wanted to do. And if this is something they wanted to dive into, and when and how and where, and what types of resources, and who would work on it. Well, over the past 6 and 9 months, and this is just speaking about our experience personally, we have been getting a lot of inbound interest from large groups, some very large groups, and large groups so large that we never even thought we were going to reach out to or talk to or would be able to have conversations with. And now they're in a place where they're starting to do their external research. Internal research has been completed, decisions have been made, external research is now happening, and larger groups, and I'm mostly seeing it across the QSR, FSR sector, so not quite yet full scale. There is some, but not as much. These QSR, FSR enterprise groups are out there, and they're looking for what is happening in the AI ML space, starting with voice recognition for both taking orders and as well as answering phones, AI ML or chatbot messaging for user feedback and things like that. We're seeing people such as yourselves who are utilizing AI and ML to be able to determine what type of marketing or what type of item, and I don't want to speak for what you all do because you do it so much better than I do, but to inform a guest what is the next right thing that they want, right? To be that Spotify, Netflix suggestion piece. And then also what we do, which is this, I call it back office, financial support acumen, automated scheduling, automated labor, automated purchasing, all of those acumens come to mind. I'm seeing all of that starting to happen in the QSR, FSR space all across these enterprise restaurant groups, up to and including the whole Wendy's things that's happened as of recent, where Wendy's announced last week that they were going to use AI/ML to be able to determine pricing. Obviously, there was a bit of a hiccup there when somebody made it a moniker that it was surge pricing, which I really don't believe, because I actually think, and I'll just put a quick anecdote here on this, I actually think that restaurateurs are going to be utilizing it most often to actually cut pricing to optimize sales during down periods. I don't think people are going to utilize it to surge pricing. I think people are going to be utilizing it to give deals, to be able to develop net new relationships with new customers and enrich relationships with customers where they are trying to fill in gaps. So
Yeah.
back to brass tacks, I see AI and ML being adopted now at scale across enterprise, QSR, FSR, and I think in the next 3 to 5 years, that's going to make its way down to both full service, fine dining, as well as mid-market and SMB. And the really interesting thing, I think, more so than anything else, is it's not going to happen necessarily because mom and pop pick up the phone and go out and look for it, although they are. I think the adoption is going to happen because some of the larger tech players are going to start to pull some of this stuff inside of their tech stack, which also hasn't happened as of yet, to my 2 cents.
So love to pick on that. So typically, to your point, what we see a lot of times is the bigger companies will adopt the more, new of age, coming of age tech, and then it slowly starts to trickle its way down, right? Like in the past, we've seen a lot of that, mainly because it's been extremely expensive, very tough to implement. You need a lot of time, money, resources. However, now what we're seeing is a lot of companies like myself and yours are coming with very feasible options and targeted at some of the smaller brands. There's a potential where folks aren't necessarily waiting for the big folks to take that dive. And some of the folks maybe, in that mid-market or even on the SMB side are looking to adopt it. Or do you think it's always going to follow that track of, hey, the big players have to do it to really prove its market worth and market fit before it trickles its way down?
I'm gonna take the position that I throughout this call have been saying all these people and all the time, all these black and white statements, and the answer to the question is in fact gray, right? So what I'm seeing is at the SMB mid-market level, there is way more people adopting AI and ML solutions as a function to help to run their business in various capacities than I have seen anybody adopt anything else prior, right? So the uptake in technology is happening faster than it's ever happened right now. If you look at, comparatively speaking, how long it took for people to move away from centrally located point of sale systems to cloud-based systems, that happened over an arc of 15 to 20 years. And maybe 50% of the restaurants in the United States still are based off of a piece of hardware that's connected to a server that sits in an office somewhere in their basement. So it's still happening. So if it took 15 to 20 years starting in the 90s to get to now, or starting in the 2000s to get to now, I think we're cutting down those timelines by 66, 67, 68, 70%. I think we're going to see adoption, what normally would have taken 10 to 15 years. I think we're going to see it in the next 2 to 3, 3 to 5, 2 to 3 in mid-market, 3 to 5 in SMB, where we cross the 51 percentile adoption mark. I think right now in SMB, we're probably somewhere swimming in the like 2 to 5 to 7 range. I think in the mid-market, it's probably a little bit further along than that 14 to 15% range. I think at the enterprise level, it's probably closer to like the 30 to 40% range where they've adopted some sort of AI ML. I think when we cross the 51% mark on all 3 of those segments is going to be within the next 3 to 5 years. But there's a bell curve, right? So I think we're going to see more and more and more and more and more. And then once we get over that 51% mark, to me, this is when the big players come in and they're like, well, I can't wait anymore. I got to jump in. And that's when we see those publicly traded companies start to gobble up and acquire some of these other companies in the space.
Yeah. And that have a big franchise presence to attract people to buy into that and franchise out. They'd want to have a very modern tech stack, right? Otherwise, someone's going to go to someone like, yeah, I'd much rather go with this tech stack because it fits with what I see today versus this very old school.
I'm seeing that, and I'm seeing one other thing happening also very big scale. And that is franchisors wanting their franchisees to be profitable. It's life saving. It's mission saving. It's mission critical. It has to happen. Labor costs are nothing but going up, 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 and up. And it's not going to change. It's not going to downshift anytime soon. The laws are already written. Next several years, more and more and more uptick. And despite the federal government's best efforts, inflation on food has not slowed down. So that continues to increase. So whereas previously everybody was trying to hit, again, trying to hit a rough target in the hospitality industry across 30% cost of labor and 30% cost of goods, those are creeping. They're creeping up and up and up and up and up. You cannot cut to profitability. And everybody in the restaurant industry who is successful knows that. But you can optimize to a better profitability. So it's not about cutting. It's about figuring out when you need what resources that you need at what time and having them at that time and not excess. I don't want more food than I need, and I don't want more beverage than I need. I want it on hand at the right time. That's the procurement side of things. On labor resourcing side of things, it's the same thing. My team in my restaurants want to be in those restaurants when they are busy, because that's what's fun, when they're interacting with the most amount of guests, and it's also when they're making the most amount of money. They don't want to be there when it's slow because it's boring and they don't make any money. In that, we're in the exact same boat. If you staff incorrectly on a Monday or a Tuesday and you overstaff and you look at your numbers and you see that you now are running out of budget for the rest of the week, you may cut on Friday and Saturday. And now you don't have the right amount of people. And now you're giving bad service, and ticket times are slow, and turn times are slow, and upselling is not happening, and guest experience is not happening, and building relationships is not happening. And now you have wasted money here when you could have utilized it here, and these people would have been happier, and you had people standing around here, and it didn't work. So it's about optimization. And that's what I'm seeing is needing to be happening. And that's why I think this AIML piece is so very critical to people, because a lot of franchisees who are running 3, 4, or 5 different stores, or maybe more, or maybe a few less, they're busy running their businesses. They don't have time to sit around and analyze data all day long and come up with all these actionable decisions. So if somebody can do it for them, boom.
Yeah. I mean, to me, what I've seen too, it's gone from buzzword to gimmick / fad to almost table stakes, right? Like without it, it's like, how do you keep a business operational? It makes it really challenging.
If some of the bigger players buy some of the companies that are currently offering up these solutions in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, the restaurateurs won't have to adopt them. It will be served to them. It will be given to them on a silver platter. The answers will just show up, period. Whereas previously you had to type in your code. Now it's just going to scan your face and they're just going to let you on the plane. Delta's just doing that. That's just what they're doing. So if the tech players they're going to adopt it, because the answers are going to be right there.
Yeah. I always go back to think about Apple Pay, right? I remember when it first came out, I'm like, super convenient. Yes. And other friends are like, no, whoa. I'm never going to do this. And now they're all about it. So it becomes almost like, it just becomes, you don't think about it anymore. It's like subconsciously we just do it now. And I think that's where we're going to start to get to. I do have one more question for you then. I just kind of want to wrap up here is, I think back to NRA, right? And a lot of the shows we go to, but primarily NRA, because you see so many different operators there, right? Operators, vendors, all. So I'll never forget walking on the floor, and it's like almost every other booth had talked something about AML plastered on there. So as someone that now, you live in both worlds, right? As an operator and now on the vendor side as well, as running your own business on the tech side. What kind of advice can you give to folks of how do you vet out what is real AI ML technology versus like how many people are just using it as a buzzword to get people in, on demos or whatever that?
So I'll start off with just a little bit of base foundation. No one has AI anything, first and foremost. ChatGPT itself is not $7 billion into ChatGPT and another 10 or whatever going into it next. It's not AI, it's ML. Right. So everything that we're seeing is ML first and foremost, because it's not sentient. It's not teaching itself.
Right.
It is machine-based learning. It's not sentient learning. And so first things first, that. Second thing is software development is not data science. It's not machine learning. It's not machine learning engineering. It's even not often data analysis. And these are two very different things, and they're very different trades. So if you are a point of sale company or a reservation-based company or any other company, you are a software company, but you are not a data science company. You are not a machine learning company. ChatGPT is a data science company. It's an ML company, but they have software, and you go to their, chatgpt.com or whatever the website is. It's just a screen with a text box, and you press a button. It's the least amount of engineering in the history of the most expensive technology that's ever been built from a front-facing UI UX perspective, because they spend their money on data science and machine learning. That's where they're pumping all of their resources into. And just like Google on the top, a search bar, and a button. And that's it, right? That's as complicated as it is from a front-facing UI UX perspective, but the data science and the ML behind it is massive and massive and massive. So I say that as an example because most of the companies that are in the restaurant space right now, they're software companies. That's what they are. And they have software engineers that work on their team, front-end designers and back-end designers and UI UX designers and solution architects and some other people who work on their teams, but not data scientists, not machine learning engineers, often not even data analysts. So the secret is, if you want to go and vet out a company to understand whether or not they have any true machine learning functionality going on behind their window, is you can check and see if they have anybody on their team that does any of those things. And if they don't, you can ask them, who on your team is currently spearheading your data scientists or data science? You know, if you want to, can I talk to them? I'd love to have a conversation. I would love to understand a little bit how this works. If you really want to dig into it, let me have a conversation with your data scientists. I want to hear about how you're doing this. That is the easiest way to go about doing it, and that will put rubber to the road on 90% of the companies that are out there. Yeah. Full transparency. And the other thing I think is interesting to also understand, if you look at some of the biggest companies in the space that are publicly traded and worth tens of billions of dollars, and look at what their data science team looks like, it's often non-existent. So ask yourself a question. Why is the largest companies in the food tech space currently lacking a data science team? Well, if they don't have a data science team, it's certainly not for lack of resources. Yeah. So it's either for lack of, they haven't done it yet, or they're not quite sure that they want to do it yet. And I lean more towards the latter than the former, right? Because they got the money. So then I go down to the mid-market companies. Are they marketing AI and ML? In what way, in what capacity? And do they have a data science team, right? And then I get myself down to the smaller upstart companies and some of these burgeoning companies, of which we are one. And do they have a data science team? And that's how I like to understand where people are at in their journey. And then if you're, and that's to answer the first piece of the question. To answer the second piece of the question about how you figure out what you want to do, go talk to a data scientist. Go and find a data scientist or a machine learning engineer, or even a data analyst, somebody who graduated with a degree in data analytics, who probably has taken some form of data science and machine learning course over the last 2 or 3 years, definitely has things to say about what how you should be thinking about what you could do, how you could be looking to solve some of your solutions. You will probably, and very likely, don't need a data scientist. And you probably don't very likely need a machine learning engineer. You might only need a data analyst, and you might only need somebody who understands data analytics, because what you're trying to do might actually be simple rudimentary math with a little bit of forecasting rolled into it. It really depends what the solution is. But you might not need this full data science team, which is quite costly and takes quite a long time to build. And then you have to have people that can interact with them on the engineering side, because not every software engineer knows how to build things that are specifically for the data science world. So now you need full stack data scientists who can also code. These are hard to find. So the way I would suggest going about doing it is just talk to somebody in the data analytics side and data analysis side, and see if you can solve what you want to do with that first. And if you can't, then I would move up the rung and continue to move up the rung. But as you do so, understand that the challenge of both finding those people as well as affording those people is compelling.
Yes, not easy. Branden, insightful as always. Thank you so much for sharing. The stories are amazing. I mean, your insight into the industry is always, I love to hear it. I mean, I feel like we could have this chat for hours and hours and hours. I want to finish with a quick lightning round, just so folks get to know a little bit more about you. What's your current favorite cocktail of choice?
Daiquiri.
Specific type? Is there?
I like a simple straight daiquiri, not the, frou-frou frozen up thing, which I do love as well, but just a straight daiquiri. Just a little bit of lime, a little bit of simple, a little bit of rum, over ice, shaken like a mother, straight up.
Nice. You worked a lot of different restaurants in your life. Do you have any famous home-cooked meal that you're known for?
Beef bourguignon is one of my favorite things to cook. It's out of, and I use Thomas Keller's recipe out of the Bouchon cookbook. Thomas from Per se and French Laundry in California, but also Bouchon in Vegas and Bouchon in the French Laundry, which I recommend everybody to go to Bouchon if you can't get into the French Laundry, which is very hard to get into. And there is a recipe inside of his cookbook for beef bourguignon that it took me the last time I made it 4 days to make, but worth it all the time, and everybody, was absolutely delicious.
I'm going to have to take you up on that next time I'm in Philly. Brunch party or dinner party?
Dinner party, always, because, wine.
You can't have wine at brunch?
You can have wine at brunch, but you usually have Prosecco at brunch, and it's just not the same. I'd like to, when I drink wine, it's champagne, white wine, red wine, more red wine, if I'm being honest, and then dessert wine. and that just doesn't play at brunch. So
Yeah, that's fair. Okay. So last question is, outside of obviously your own restaurants, do you have a restaurant you want to shout out in Philly that is one of your favorite restaurants today?
can I say a couple?
Sure.
Zahav, Mike and Steve, Ellen, A Kitchen A Bar, Federal Donuts, also Mike and Steve, Her Place, Amanda Schulman, Royal Sushi and Izakaya, Jesse Ito. Those are our haunts. Those are the places that we go more often than anything else. Dear friends, great restaurants. Recommended to anybody who comes to Philadelphia to go to those.
Love it. Maybe making my way over to Philly soon, so I'll definitely have to check some of those places out. Brandon, thank you so much for joining. As always, enjoy our conversations. This time we recorded for the world to see. To recap, I mean, we talked about a lot of cool stuff. Your unbelievable experience, the importance of the hospitality element in any restaurant, and how that creates an emotional experience for diners, which gets them to come back. The advent and almost what is going to become table stakes for a lot of restaurants is the focus on ANML and the opportunity of what it can do to help you become more efficient. And just overall, what you're seeing kind of in the industry today and kind of where things are going next. So I think a lot of really cool things we've taken away from this episode. How can folks find you? Yourself, 5 if people want to learn more, tell everybody how to the best way to reach out to you.
You can go to the website and you can fill out the form, and somebody will reach out to you right away. That also goes directly to me, or you can just email me directly. And my email address is my first name, which is Branden, Branden, ampersand, or not ampersand, at symbol. I always make that mistake. At 5, the number 5, OUT.io. So you can either email me directly or you can get me through the website.
Perfect. And we'll have all those details in the description. Again, I'm your host, Arun Kumar, and then brings us to an amazing episode of Data Delicacies. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more. If you're interested in being on the show, we do have some spots available. You can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, or my email is arun@incentivio.com. And I will be at all the major shows coming up. So MERTech, RLC, NRA, FS Tech. I'm usually on the road for most of them. So if you want to come chat in person, please come and do that. Always love to chat all things hospitality. Or if you're interested in learning more about Incentivio, or you want to get on the show, by all means, let's connect and let's do it. So until next time, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you all soon.